Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm great. I'm sorry I was an hour late.
Okay. Do you like how all this is turning out now? Instead of
This
it
is
being
great.
dark, we have a little bit of light.
I like it. I love
Okay.
it. I mean, we'll see how the final product looks, but for now, I like it.
Peace up, A-Town.
I have not seen this.
Vaccinate me at the party. Vaccination freak. Vaccination freak league. I want the vaccine in my life. I want the vaccine for my wife. I want to vaccinate you all day long. Vaccinate you, I'll wear my thong. Vaccinate me, pure air. Gotta vaccinate in the Lone Star State. Vaccination is so great. Vaccinate me all day long. Vaccinate your daddy and mom. Vaccinate my body. Vaccinate me at the party. I vaccine dream.
Who is this? Who is this person?
That's Primetime Stein is what he goes
Did
as.
people think he was serious?
So there was a version. There was a version of that with no music where he goes to the Dallas City Council like once a month
Right.
and goes there
I heard
to just
about
talk
that.
about whatever. Yeah. So he did the rap without the music there. And he went on to, I forget which show it was on the Blaze, but he went on to one of those shows and talked about how he's perceived and why he does what he does. And he just calls himself a troll, a real life troll.
Okay, so he's just a troll.
So for a while, a lot of
crying, I
people
was laughing
thought
so
that
hard.
that was a legitimate, pure rant that he did. But
Oh.
he goes to these things once a month. He did a Zoom call when he was trying to, make abortion legal in Texas, like to get the heart bill extended past 6 weeks because
Yeah.
he said, I've gotten all these women pregnant. I don't want to take care of any of these. And he's in a suit and everything.
Oh,
and
I see.
it's pretty funny.
What's his name?
Primetime Stein on Instagram. I
That
don't
was
know.
very funny.
It's good, right?
Yeah, that was good.
I also like to acknowledge there probably wasn't a better time in hip hop, and this is up for debate, but early to mid 2000s Atlanta,
Right.
Houston hip hop was probably one
Adriano
of
was
those.
very much into 90s hip hop.
Yeah, 90s hip hop is fine.
That's his favorite.
I'm partial to East Coast hip hop from the late 90s and on, but as far as wanting to dance or going out to clubs, the early 2000s
Yeah.
from the South really had.
When did
had
you graduate
a,
from college again?
2006.
Okay, I was 2011. I was a little bit after you.
A little bit.
And
yeah.
I went to school in Atlanta.
Oh, cool. So
Yeah.
what was that like?
It was very Atlanta. It was so when I left Atlanta, I guess because I lived there a little bit after I graduated.
Mm-hmm.
Atlanta was still awesome, but now apparently it's gone to hell. But the club scene back then was very fun.
Vaccinate your body. Vaccinate me at the party.
That's my favorite part.
No,
At the party.
my favorite line is "vaccinate my wife" or what is it?
Vaccinate me while I'm wearing a thong. Vaccinate me all night long. Big news. We do have our first sponsor to the I'm Doing
Yeah.
Great podcast, so we would like to shout them out. Fog City. If you don't know Fog City is an amazing watch retailer. They mainly deal in vintage Rolex watches, vintage Patek Philippe, vintage AP. And for a lot of people that don't know, I am very interested and intrigued, not obsessed, with watches.
I was gonna say maybe you're a little bit obsessed with watches.
Yeah. But Fog City, they like what we do. They like what we talk about. And they were very, very excited to get involved with us. So the first sponsor of our show, Fog City, you can find them on Instagram at Fog City Vintage. Please look them up. If you are a fan of Rolexes, if your husband or wife is a fan of Rolexes, they have a great selection. Their Instagram is very engaging. They do a lot of great visual art around their watch. I don't know what they're doing as far as the possibility of introducing NFTs in the watch space, but it's very, very interesting. The art is really good. The photos are really good. And they are really engaged with their followers, which is nice.
I should get my husband a watch. He loves watches. So
Well-
thank you, Fog City.
Yes. Now you know who to talk to.
Yeah.
I wanted to start off this podcast talking about a movie that I had watched over the weekend, not for the first time. And I believe I talked to you about this. Have you seen the movie Road to Perdition?
I actually have not.
Okay.
Do I need to see it?
No, you don't necessarily need to see it. I can give you a little bit of a rundown, but I had this movies that I enjoy leave me with philosophical questions that I can't seem to shake for a week at least. And I watched it on Saturday, and this movie came out early mid 2000s. Sam Mendes director.
You're right.
Tom Hanks, Paul Newman. I had always confused it as a Steven Spielberg movie just because it kind of had that vibe, and Tom Hanks is in it.
Yeah.
But the movie circles and focuses on a hitman.
Is it based on a book?
It's based on a graphic novel.
Okay.
So Road to Perdition protagonist, the main protagonist, is a man named Michael Sullivan, who works for the Irish mob during the Depression. He's a hitman, basically, an enforcer, a collector. And he works for Paul Newman's character, a Mr. Rooney. And on a night where Michael Sullivan is told to talk to someone with Mr. Rooney's son to clear up some sort of misunderstanding, a murder takes place, perpetuated by Mr. Rooney's son, who's played by Daniel Craig. So it's an earlier Daniel Craig.
Wow, good cast.
Yeah. And unbeknownst to Michael Sullivan is his son, Mike Sullivan, has hidden in the truck because he wants to know what his father does. The kids really don't know what their father does. And they dare not ask because, as his mother says, that they're having a breakfast at the table. And the father says, I'm going to be late tonight. I'm, doing some work. And then one of the sons asks, what work is that? And the mother says, putting food on the table, young man. So it's one of those things, you don't ask what your dad does. He just does what he does, and you're able to eat. But Michael sneaks out, and he witnesses the killing. So when Daniel Craig comes out, he says, oh, it's your son. So he says, don't worry about it. Tom Hanks says, don't worry about it. He's not going to say anything. As a mobster, do you take the word of someone or of a kid who says he's not going to talk?
Yeah.
So there is retribution for that, and Daniel Craig ends up. This is all in the movie. I'm not really giving away any plot points, but Daniel Craig ends up killing Michael Sullivan's wife and other son. So Michael Sullivan, Tom Hanks, goes on the run, and they try to go to Michael Sullivan's sister-in-law's lake home. That's where they want to end up, and it's in a town called Perdition, and
I see.
You know what perdition is as a studier of divinity. Perdition is just another name for.
Isn't it just another name for purgatory?
Like hell, yeah,
right.
Yeah,
not
hell, purgatory.
Okay.
But I think hell. So they embark on this journey where the two Sullivans spend 6 weeks with each other. They develop a bond. But one of the questions that I asked myself and that was left with, and another point that I wanted to make is, I really don't like it when, especially conservatives do this, they say we need more conservative movies. I think you can get points, ideas, inspiration from any movie that has, let's say, a conservative bent to it. So there are lessons, there are very conservative values in this movie that one can walk away with.
Right.
So the question that I ended up having after I watched the movie was, can an immoral or sinful person be redeemed by a final act of kindness, mercy, or charity, or is that person forever barred from heaven for the life he chose to lead? So Michael Sullivan, who is a murderer, is a gangster. Can he be redeemed by trying to protect his son from being killed and trying to exact vengeance for the murders of his wife and son? Now, he directs this question to Paul Newman. They have a meeting in the middle of the movie, and Paul Newman says, I can't just give up my son, Daniel Craig. I can't just give him up to you. And Michael Sullivan says, he killed my wife and son. Paul Newman says to him, there are only murderers in this room. And what you have to accept is the fact that none of us here will ever see heaven. And then Tom Hanks says, but Michael could. His son.
The son.
Yes. And there's a scene at the end where you kind of hope something doesn't happen. Because if it does, then it negates that thought that Tom Hanks has about his son being able to see heaven. So I'm wondering, and there are a lot of movies like this, A Bronx Tale, which has Palminteri, Sonny, the gangster, who is a gangster, probably a murderer, probably an embezzler, probably a liar. But he takes a young man under his wing, and he kind of shows him the lessons that life has to offer, how to deal with people, how to deal with women, how to deal with love, how to deal with conflict. And can someone who leads an immoral life be redeemed by either one act of kindness or acts of kindness, wisdom bestowed on other people, but necessarily doesn't take those lessons or enforce those in his own life is what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. And what do you think as a
That's the question. Well, it's very difficult to answer that question and separate that from my Christian faith. So I can't answer that separately from Christianity, because the answer to that is, and we went to church last weekend, our pastor, this was pretty much what the sermon was about. There is nothing you can ever do, nothing that you can ever do, whether you're a murderer or whether you're not, because we're all sinners. There's nothing you can do in your life that will ever redeem you and that will give you salvation. The only way that you can find salvation is through Christ. So I know that's not an answer you probably wanted, but if I'm really asking that question in the theme of a movie, or that question in general, that is always the answer, because there is literally nothing that you or I can do. And even not someone who is a murderer or a hitman or whatever, you and I,
Yes.
we're both sinners, not necessarily on the level of murdering people, but every single one of us is a sinner. And there's literally nothing that you can do on earth. There's no action, there's no redeemable action that will save you.
Yeah. I struggle with these types of questions every day, because to me it seems like someone like a Michael Sullivan, who has led this life and chose that life of his own free will, and then does something really remarkable by trying to protect his son and
Right.
kind of shield him from all the I don't want to call it negativity, but all the evil that he's experienced
Yeah.
and done in his own life. To me, I don't want to say if I was a God or if I were God, but to me that seems like a redeemable quality in someone that I would want that person,
Yeah.
to
What
be in heaven.
what I think about that is that it definitely shows that even the worst of men have the capability to do good.
Yeah.
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 So what I think that shows more than anything is that even the worst amongst us is capable of attempting to redeem themselves.
Right. And the possibility of change can still happen in someone.
Right.
And this is something that's interesting, because today, as we tape the show, is Martin Luther King Day, and whether it was revealed by FBI wiretaps or whatever, the rumor or a lot of what I have heard before is about how Martin Luther King Jr. was a philanderer,
Right.
cheated on his wife, something like that. Nelson Mandela was seen as a terrorist up until 2008, because he but he was a part of the group that was the AVC, the African National Congress. And he led the military wing of that group and was responsible for bombings.
Right.
So can someone who has bombed government buildings, killed civilians, cheated on his wife, can they be lifted up after atonement for those quote unquote sins and be able to be redeemed? And that's
Yeah.
very weird. Can someone who has raped children, killed children, who sits in a cell, can they be redeemed? And this is something that I've heard before. And there's a great YouTube channel out there called Ask Cliff, and I've been sending you his videos. And as a pastor, he says, I've sat in cells with these people, and I can't put upon them any judgment other than listening to them and trying to convince them to, or trying to get them to come to Christ. And once they do that, they are redeemable. But then a normal person would say, not a normal person, but maybe a logical thinking person would say, no, once you kill kids, once you rape kids, you lose that.
Yeah, well, here's another thing about that. I do believe that there are certain crimes that are so heinous that you lose your right, or the right isn't the right word, I guess, right, you lose your right to live in civilized society. And that is when the death penalty is useful.
Right.
So is that person redeemable? Yeah, probably. But when you get to the level of child rape, something as heinous as that, you have lost, you don't deserve to live in a civilized society. And I do believe that's the death penalty exists to deter people from particularly heinous crimes.
Yeah.
And so is that person redeemable? I mean, that is a question between them and God, but that should not stop us from making the decision that needs to be made as a society and as judges and jurors, that that person has very likely lost their chance to live in a civilized society, and maybe even live.
Yeah, we necessarily shouldn't judge people, but we have to make judgment calls.
Yeah,
on moral
well,
issues.
I think
right?
so judgment, this is
Or is this all circular? Like this, we can
not
just talk.
necessarily, because I think that the term judging someone has become vilified. I think judgment is a very good thing. Judgment is good. Shaming is good. You know, you hear a lot of these terms like body shaming and slut shaming. Well, I actually think there are very good tools to shame is a good tool, and so is judgment, because we have to judge people in order to have a civilized society. Judgment is a good thing. And so in those cases, yeah, those people should be judged.
Right. But judging so far as we stone people to death, and I'm using stones figuratively here,
Right.
or we have a justice system. Because when we take, let's say, justice into our own hands, like, do you just go out and kill child rapists, or do you allow the system to take care of them?
Well, allow the system.
Okay.
To,
Yeah, because a lot of people would say, you know,
yeah.
I'll go after these people if you let me.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I'm sure it would be different if it were my child or something like that, or a child that I knew,
Yeah.
but still they have to go through the system. But I do think that our system should be quite strict in heinous crimes like that.
I agree.
Yeah. Like
Okay.
you don't deserve to live.
Right.
But someone who, what's the guy's name? Michael Sullivan?
Yeah.
Hitmen, murderers. I mean, I'm like, here we are saying the murderers are okay.
Well, no, but you have people dealing in illegal activity. So
Right.
it's the rule among hitmen, no women or children.
Right.
They deal with people who...
Do you watch Peaky Blinders?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a great scene, one of my favorite scenes between Cillian Murphy and Tom Hardy. So Thomas Shelby and Alfie.
Yeah.
And Thomas Shelby freaks out on Alfie, puts a gun in his face and screaming, "He's my boy! They took my boy!" You know, and Alfie gets right in his face and he says, "How many sons have we murdered? How many husbands have we murdered? And now you're going to come in my face and tell me, give me some kind of moral BS about this is your boy."
Right.
And he's right, you know, all of a sudden now, because it's Thomas Shelby's son, then it becomes a matter of honor, right? Then it becomes a matter of honesty and truth between him and Alfie. But Alfie was playing the same exact game that he and Thomas Shelby have always played.
Right. And like what Paul Newman said, there are only murderers in this room.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And that when you said that reminded me of that scene with Thomas Shelby.
I mean, Road to Perdition is a great movie. I really didn't give too much away, but if you can, give it a watch. It's a really good movie, and there are some really good lessons to learn from it. And if you're of a right-leaning persuasion, I think that there are some lessons that you can get from it. Because, you know, when we get to the point of being, you know, conservatives who won't watch movies because certain actors are in it.
So silly.
I think it's so silly. There's so much information that you don't get to be a part of.
What people hate, what conservatives hate to admit, is that a lot of these films, they're art that ignites a conversation and something inside of us that we cannot articulate in day-to-day life. So art is very necessary to our society. And conservatives, it's really annoying to me how conservatives just want to push it to the side because some leftist director made it.
Yeah.
So like here's a movie that always really speaks to me. It's based on a short story. It's called Arrival.
Yes, that's one of my favorite movies of all time.
Me too.
Yeah.
I watched it kind of recently again when I was pregnant, and I mean, it is a movie that makes me cry for like half an hour after it's over.
Same.
So this is going to be a huge spoiler. So if you haven't seen the movie,
hold on. Spoiler alert! If you haven't seen Arrival,
just fast forward, please, because you
yeah.
got to see this movie. It gives me goosebumps just to think about. So,
Me
okay,
too.
those of you who have fast forwarded, now let's get into it if you've seen it. So, Amy Adams, is that her name? Amy
Yes.
something. She's a linguist.
She's a linguist.
She's a linguist who is called on site to attempt to interact with and translate the messages of aliens who have landed on Earth. Long story short, the film gives you a lot of what you think are flashbacks.
Right.
And there are these flashbacks with her and her daughter, probably 10, 11 years old, playing and you know, just these sweet, tender moments with her daughter that you think that she's referring back to in her memory, right? And then you see that she's obviously single and there's no child in the house. So you assume that the child dies.
Right.
Well, I'm going to try to condense this. The aliens, they have no sense of time. Like one of the messages that they were trying to give, it says there is no time.
Right.
But the world leaders mistook that to mean that there's no
countdown.
It's a countdown. There's
Right.
no time left. We're going to
Right.
destroy the Earth. But what the aliens meant is that there's no such thing as time, because the
Right.
way even they communicated was circular.
Right.
So while Amy Adams was communicating with aliens and she was working with Jeremy Renner, who was also a scientist, not a linguist, but a scientist, whatever, she was having these flashbacks. She was having flash forwards. She was having visions of the child that she was going to have with Jeremy Renner.
Yeah.
And she knew that this child would die of a very rare form of cancer when she was 10 or 11 years old. And she knew she was going to have this child with Jeremy Renner.
Yeah.
And she chose to do it anyway.
Right.
And it makes me so emotional because this is a really, really a very relevant question in society today, particularly when we talk about abortion.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the arguments from the left is that, well, we need to have abortion rights, which is not a thing. We need to have reproductive rights because children may be born into a family or a lifestyle that's very damaging to them.
Sure.
And this is an argument, and it's so crazy
Born
to
with
me.
physical, mental
Yes,
deformities.
right. So even a child who has
restrictions.
Down syndrome, they
Right.
think, oh, well, that person doesn't deserve to live because they're mentally retarded.
Right.
So this movie, it evokes so many meaningful questions about parenthood and the question of, would you do it if you
And
knew?
love.
And love
Yeah.
and real love and tragedy, and still choosing the human desire to choose to live through human tragedy because there is love
And
there.
getting a divorce. Did you mention that they ended up getting a
Right.
divorce?
They ended up
because of
getting a
that?
divorce because Jeremy Renner found out that Amy Adams knew the whole time.
Right.
And he got mad. He said, why would you do this? Why would you do this to us if you knew this was going to happen? And I cried and cried and cried because I was pregnant at the time. But
Yeah.
even thinking about it now, having a daughter, like, would I do that? And the question is yes, absolutely, 100%.
The first 5 minutes of that movie is devastating. I really challenge anyone to watch that without crying because
yeah.
there's dialogue in that opening sequence that I don't know if a lot of people miss, but there's a scene after she gives birth where a nurse is holding her and the baby starts crying and she says, "Come back to me."
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
It's tough. Like I'm even like
I know.
getting a little
I know. And
caught up, but
and the
that's
end,
the last thing that she says.
It's
to
the
her.
last thing that she says to her.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is. I mean, it's both of us having a daughter. It's like, would you do that? Would you go through that knowing, or would you choose not to have the child, or would you abort your child? And the answer is definitely no. I mean,
Yeah.
she chose to live that because she saw that there was going to be the purest form of love, and just to give that child a chance at life, even if she knew that the child wasn't going to have very long on earth.
Yeah, and this is what, getting back to that point about conservatives missing out on art, there's the take that conservatives hate modern art because it's really just it's a bunch of nothingness. But the thing is that as much as people like art that has come from the Renaissance or even the Impressionists or the Romantic periods, is that even with modern art, there are explanations behind these things where if someone put a black dot on a huge white canvas and they mentioned the story behind it or the inspiration behind it, and let's say it was a child who knew that was going to have complications, and this was that artist's representation of that, I think is very important. I think we miss out on a lot of these types of conversations that we're able to have because of, some influencer telling us that modern art is dumb and modern art is not conservative.
Right.
It's just, I don't
Another
buy into any of that.
Another movie that conservatives hated that I actually really enjoyed was Moonlight.
Moonlight, I enjoyed cinematography. I enjoyed, the score was fantastic.
The score was
The score was
amazing.
really good. But again, it's these things where I want stories that happen to people on an everyday basis that you don't get to see. And this is probably a story that has happened to one or two people out there. And it's this really endearing story about a kid who had nothing, an abusive mother, finds affection from a bad person,
A drug dealer.
who treats him correctly,
Yeah.
and who also struggles with his sexuality
Right.
during that whole period up until adulthood. And it's just one of those movies where you may see it as arty, there might be an agenda being pushed, but watch a movie for yourself and then have a conversation about it with somebody.
Yeah.
I think we miss out on so much.
We miss out on so much. I mean, and I'll say there haven't been that many great films in the last 2 years, but I think there's still so much out there that you can watch and get a lot out of. But conservatives are so stubborn about it.
I also don't know if it was necessarily worthy of Best Picture.
Of Best
award.
Picture,
Yeah.
I didn't think
I
so
mean,
either.
Yeah, but that's another discussion. I don't think it
Right.
really has anything to do with the actual meat of the
Right.
film itself. But
Yeah.
so we talked about movies for a little bit.
Yeah,
and
I like
almost
this.
cried on camera.
There you go. That's the
I
thing about
love
having a
Arrival.
daughter.
Oh God, you know what I do?
So good.
Once or twice a week, or once every 2 weeks, I watch the opening sequence from Arrival. And if you can, the book that it's based on is from a book of short stories called "The Story of Us All." Maybe Or is that what that particular story was called? I have the book.
think
I
it
forget
was
what it's
that.
called.
Let me look it up.
Yeah, Arrival was. I mean, I can go right here and I can see
Yeah, look it up.
Arrival short story. It's by
Story-
Ted Chiang. I
Story
know it's
of
by
Your Life.
yeah, Story of Your Life by Ted Chiang, and there are a lot of really interesting short stories that are in there that we could also talk about
Man,
too.
such
but,
a good film.
let's get into some questions from the
Yeah.
followers.
Yeah, so Mike chose these.
Again, thank you, Fog City, for sponsoring this episode.
Thank you, Fog City. I'm
And-
serious. I'm getting
and-
my husband a watch.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I'm serious.
Joel, do you like watches?
I don't like watches.
Did you see the movie Arrival?
Nope.
Did you see the movie Road to Perdition?
No.
Okay.
I don't like watches at all.
Well, we're glad you're here anyway.
I've been given watches from brands over the years, and I just give them away.
Yeah, I don't blame you. You probably haven't been given
I've
anything
never
good.
been into watches myself, but
I'm into them. I
Yeah.
don't have any expensive watches.
I think it's a
just
nice thing to
yet.
be into.
I have a very sentimental watch that maybe I'll wear in the next episode, and we could talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so let's get into the questions. I did pick some out that were asked in our sticker on our Instagram page, which is at IDG the podcast, and then there were a couple from Gina's personal page that I picked. She sent me a couple of them. The first one is, as a 2A supporter, what are some proposed solutions to mass shootings, particularly in schools?
So this is, I'm sorry, it's such a dumb question. I don't think this person actually believes that guns should be taken away because of school shootings. I think that they're asking for an argument to give to someone who believes that. It's such
I mean, just based on the question, proposed solutions to mass shootings.
Right.
So
And-
what are some of the solutions
right.
that we could...
So first of all, it's kind of I hate this cliche, but it's true. Guns don't kill people. People do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I forgot the percentage, but I believe almost every single one of the last school shootings to have happened in the last few years, that gun was obtained illegally. So I'll tell you right off the bat, a proposed solution has nothing to do with gun control. Okay. So it doesn't, so almost all of these cases, that gun was obtained illegally. So what on earth are more gun laws or gun restrictions going to do in a case like that?
Nothing, yeah. And recently
Nothing.
with that hostage situation in Texas by that Al-Qaeda sympathizer supporter, Joe Biden made a statement about it and then ultimately pivoted to gun control message.
Yeah. Yeah. So one book, I kind of forgot the Why Meadow Died or something like that. Try and look that up. So it's a father who wrote a book. His daughter was killed in a school shooting, and he details a lot of what the school intentionally ignored about this shooter. And all
Is it from Parkland? Why Meadow died?
Why Meadow died. Why Meadow died. The people and policies that created the Parkland shooter and endanger America's students. So we talk about proposed solutions for school shootings. A lot of that begins in the schools. Okay, so there you'll probably never find a school shooter who just comes out from behind the curtains out of the blue and shows no signs of having mental disturbances or any sort of mental issues.
Correct.
You'll never find a school shooter like that. There
Right.
are always signs, and most of these schools have not done anything about the signs that are in front of their face for however many months or years that they were in front of them. And this is a huge issue. What's the percentage? I think probably it's got to be over 90% of school shooters are male, right?
Yeah.
So a big issue here is a broader conversation of what's happening with young men in society today, that they would feel the need to resort to extreme violence and mass shootings.
Yeah.
And this is a lot of different elements and layers of boys being shoved into a lecture style education that does not suit their learning abilities whatsoever. And then when they struggle with that from a young age, then you diagnose them with some sort of mental disorder like ADHD, and then pump them up with severe medication that's only a couple of molecules away from cocaine. And then on top of that, you keep suppressing their true learning abilities and don't let them express themselves and express their masculinity in a way that's healthy. So of course you're going to have these outliers who don't respond well to that. And they have so many mental issues that continually are ignored and pushed under the rug by school administrators and faculty. So a proposed solution to that, well, maybe we need to rethink the way that we bring up boys in the school system.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to seriously consider what needs to be done with these boys who are having serious mental issues and who are really struggling to learn in a classroom setting in a way that maybe some boys and most girls are totally okay with.
Yeah, I agree with solutions with the bulk of them lying within family and societal structures. So school structure, the family structure, you have to be more involved with your kids because these kids tend to kind of fall between the fingers of their parents where the
Yes.
parents don't notice.
Right.
So that is to an extent a fault of the parents. But also, I mean, with the Parkland shooting specifically, I think, local law enforcement and even federal law enforcement notified either the school or the parents of this kid, this shooter, to some problems that he had or threats that he'd made or things that he'd done in the past, like either bringing a gun to school. I can't remember the specifics of it, but either the school board, the school itself, or the parents kind of shrugged it off, and then he did what he did. I don't know if necessarily, because you hear a lot of the time, well, the teachers need to be armed, and I'm a little bit hesitant just because I don't like randomly arming people who aren't dedicated to actually.
But what about a security officer?
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
I believe they should have weapons.
There are those things. Security officers, armed security officers, uniformed security officers are also soft targets. They're not hard targets. So if I see somebody, standing outside of a school, inside of a school who's armed, that's the first person I'm going after. So you kind of want to make those a little bit harder targets where you have kind of plain clothes looking like teachers or younger looking people looking like students, which is probably good. I think definitely having armed people on site is a good idea. And even with this thing at the synagogue that happened over the weekend, I mean, every church, every synagogue, every mosque should have armed security there.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it sucks because given that the world is in the way that it is now, it seems like a logical thing to have. I mean, I wish these things don't happen, but they do, and you have to be.
People just get so uncomfortable about the idea of guns being present, and I don't know why. There are actually statistics.
I carry a gun all the time. Nobody knows that I have one.
Yeah, and here's the thing: there are actually statistics showing that just simply the presence of a firearm
is a deterrent.
And it's actually saved lives, or at least saved from from there being violence.
You would think that Jews would have probably figured this out. The one place we should probably have guns and security is in synagogues.
Yeah.
And a fascinating story about that is, I mean, you talk about the Polish resistance in Warsaw during the occupation of Warsaw. It's something fantastic, where these group of Jews is led by one guy who didn't even know how to use a gun, but they were able to secure one. This dude figured out how to use it. And the resistance in Warsaw, I think, held off the German army in Warsaw.
Wow.
For 3 or 4 weeks, something ridiculous.
Wow.
You seem it would have made sense that they would learn a lesson.
There was a video, I believe it was in 2020, maybe 2019. It was a church in Texas, I think, where an active shooter,
it's an NRA instructor.
Yeah, an active shooter came into the church, and there were several guys with a gun, and one of them was able to shoot.
Took him out.
Headshot. Yeah, took him out
as he was moving.
And he prevented that guy. Did the shooter kill anybody?
I think one person. I think like an usher or someone standing by the door.
And imagine how many more people. There were women and children in that church.
Yeah.
Imagine how many more people would have died because of this maniac. And the presence of this man who had a firearm and knew how to use it. He saved lives that day.
Yeah.
And it's crazy to me that people are uncomfortable with having some sort of armed officer or a person experienced with a firearm around kids, because that's going to be the very thing that protects them if you've got some maniac coming in with a firearm.
And I think it's harder to discern from a church congregation versus maybe a school setting. Within a church congregation, I think there might be more red flags because the congregation seem like a more tighter knit community, whereas a school that has 600, 700 students in it. But a lot of the time, the shootings in churches are committed by, I think the vast majority of them are committed by people who don't belong to that church. So it's kind of tough to kind of, prepare for those things other than just having armed security in a church, which makes sense. Family first, school boards,
the schools
being
better.
more proactive.
Yeah.
And then obviously like the mental health of young men in schools, I think is something that's very important, coming from a Second Amendment supporting point of view.
Yeah.
Like the answer isn't always more guns.
No.
It isn't always more guns.
It isn't always that.
The less guns to be used to diffuse situations, the better.
Yeah.
But guns are great.
They are great.
Next question. This is an interesting question because I think someone's about to have a problem on their hands. Someone asked you for some marriage advice, and maybe I can chime in on this too. She says, I don't think my husband really wants kids, but I want to be a mom. What do I do? It's something you better talk about.
Yeah, this is why you have to, you got to be really careful about who you marry, ladies out there. You got to think long and hard. Ariana Huffington, this quote has been wiped out from her book of quotes, not book of quotes, but her bank of quotes that's online. And she said the most important decision you will ever make for your career is who you marry. Now I know she's not talking about career, but that quote it's true, because the most important decision you will make in life is who you will marry. You have to be very, very careful about who you choose. And I'm saying this as somebody who was previously divorced. I was married before. Did I tell you that?
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, I was married before, and I got married when I was like at rock bottom of my life. And he was like, "Oh, come move to San Francisco. Well, I'll rescue you," because he was kind of like a college sweetheart, I guess, in a way. And it was not a good decision. We were not meant to be together. Thank goodness we didn't have kids. I mean, this wasn't an issue like he didn't want kids and I did. We both wanted kids, but thank goodness we didn't have kids, because when we got divorced, that would have just been terrible for the children. But I say this as a reminder to all the women out there. It is so important to marry the right person. And it's really important to have these conversations with whoever you're dating from very early on. There's a relationship, a dating coach I really like to follow online. Her name is Taylor Burrows, Burrows. Taylor's great. And she talks about how it's really important to have these conversations fairly early on, especially if you're dating to get married. You need to have these conversations very early on. So now if you are in this situation, if you're in a marriage where one of you wants kids and one of you doesn't, it's never going to get easier. It is only going to get harder year after year after year, and you will only build up more resentment, the both of you. Because here's the thing about one person wanting kids and one person not wanting kids. One of you will lose.
Yeah.
One of you will lose. And
why would anyone get married to someone knowing that he or she wouldn't want to have kids? But you do. Like, I don't understand.
A lot of people do that. A lot of people do that because you really, human nature is an interesting thing. When you love somebody, you truly make yourself believe that you can eventually change their mind.
Gotcha.
And you can eventually change them. That's what love does when you really love someone. But that's why love should not, it sounds terrible, but love should not be the primary driving force behind getting married, because you could love the wrong person. You could love someone who's not right for you and not right for your life, and your lifestyles don't match. I don't know how old you are, whoever asked this question, but I assume that you were still in the childbearing age. I think you should get divorced. I'm sorry. I think you should. You should not waste your life and your childbearing years and your eggs with someone who doesn't want children, because it is a decision that you are going to regret for the rest of your life if you want children and you don't have them while you can.
Well, also based on the question, she says, I don't think my husband really wants kids. So this is something that you should probably talk about more in depth with him.
That's true. Yeah.
And if he comes to the conclusion, I don't want kids, you have to really ask yourself, are you okay with that? Have
you guys gone to counseling? That's not a bad idea to talk through these issues with a unbiased third party. But I mean, it's just a losing game for both people, because if he acquiesces and then you guys have kids, he's probably going to be unhappy and resent you for that, because he doesn't want kids.
Right.
And, not everybody wants kids, and that's okay. I mean, kids are the greatest thing on earth, but it's okay if you don't want kids, but you should not be trapped in a marriage with somebody who does want them.
There are a lot of women out there who I feel want to get into relationships with the primary goal of changing that person. Mm-hmm. I think that's the motivation for a lot of relationships
because
out there.
Women we're so bad like that. We love the fix him up kind of guy.
Why?
That's
Why
a
bother?
Great question. It's a good question. I think it's because of women's innate biological desire to nurture and to take care of.
Okay.
So we love someone who's broken. We love a project because it almost allows us to unearth our most maternal qualities.
Okay.
Which is biologically what we want to do.
Right. Because
we're women. So I don't know. I that's my theory. I think that's one of the reasons why you see so many women date a guy or marry a guy that's just not right for them, because they love them and they think that they can change and they can fix them.
All those guys just end up being so unhappy.
Yeah, they do. It. And so to this woman, I'm sure the both of you are probably unhappy with this pending decision, because that's like the biggest decision you'll make in your life, is if you're going to have kids together as a couple.
I hope it works out.
I hope
really
it works
do.
out. I hope that he realizes that having kids is truly the greatest blessing in the world. But I don't know. Good luck to you and Godspeed.
Yeah, really. I hope you get through that struggle.
Vaccinate your body. Vaccinate me after after party. Vaccination free. Vaccination
Freak-a-leak.
I want the vaccine in my life.
I want the
It's just so
vaccine
good.
for my wife. I like that one.
I will. Oh, did you see? Oh, there was something about. Have you seen that picture of the mom, like smiling and devil eyes behind her
Yes,
son getting
yes,
the vaccine, where
yes.
the kid's crying?
Yes.
It's demonic.
It is demonic.
Tell me it's not a cult. Like, I know that's the typical meme. Like, these people are in a cult. These
No,
people
but
are in a
legit.
cult. And there was, I don't know, have you seen that video of the Michigan professor going off in a Zoom call about not wanting to be around the disease spreaders, and he was going to be wearing a mask under this helmet that filtered out air, and how it was his last
No, I
year,
didn't
and he
see
has
that.
tenure, and he can't be fired. The language, I got to bring this up.
Is he okay?
I got to bring this up. I don't know.
Are-
Let's answer the next question while you're doing your part of the answer. I can look this video
Okay,
up.
ask the question and you can search while I answer.
Here you go. Okay. Mary J. Ramos. Hola, Mary.
Hola.
What's up, Mary?
What do you
What's
want to
up-
tell Joe
what's up, baby?
Byron?
She wants to know what are our goals for the show. So think about that.
Oh, okay. Well, I know that before the end of 2022, we won 10,000 subs on YouTube.
Yeah.
And a broader goal for our show, I think, is to have conversations, particularly about what's going on with the conservative space that conservatives are not willing to have, and to be willing to criticize the conservative movement when it's needed, because I think it's needed more than ever now. We just Mike and I always talk about how all the podcasts, you're either, obviously crazy leftist, or you're just a conservative who complains about leftists all the time, but nobody's complaining about
I want to
conservatives
have
from the
one of the
conservative
goals
side.
of this show. I think I want to have people on who I agree with, and we can have discussions about current events and things. But I'd also like to have on some people who may not agree with us.
Yeah. Also, in relation to that, I want to have people on the show who conservatives are not willing to have on their shows.
Like who? Who would be one person?
Nick Fuentes.
Yes.
John Doyle.
Yes. But they're kind of. I mean, John at least is.
John's been on shows, but people absolutely hate Nick Fuentes, and I want to talk to him. I want to have a conversation with him. I think there's some things that he says that are worth listening to, and I think a lot of the things that he does say are misinterpreted even by conservatives, and it's good to have that conversation.
Yeah, I'm trying to find this.
So
video.
this guy, he wears a helmet.
Yeah. Why do they do this? All right, let me see if I can get it on YouTube.
Bum 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 bum.
Okay, so the language,
Oh my
the
gosh,
language in
look
this,
at this dude.
the language in this is pretty harsh. So there's a warning right there. But the title of this is tenured Michigan University professor who's 74 wore a helmet and mask for classes placed on leave.
Is he in
I
a
wanna introduce myself
bunker?
before we
He's in a
actually
basement?
meet, F2F, as we say these days, which everybody knows means, which really means that we're all. When you see me next week, I'll be wearing this helmet.
This looks like a skit.
This helmet is actually.
Is this not a skit?
No, this is
$300.
real.
It's got HEPA filters all around it, so that all the air that comes in, that I'm breathing, comes in through the HEPA filters, and all the air that I breathe out goes out through the HEPA filters, so that it protects
What?
both me and you.
Is he
from,
okay?
What do
this
you
deadly
think?
virus that's going around.
No, I'm worried about this
now-
guy. Like, does anybody take care of him?
I may have up my life flatter than hammered, but I stand before you today beholden to no human and working a
No
paid
human what?
union
Cocksucker.
job.
Oh, okay.
And no limber of an administrator is going to tell me how to teach my classes because I'm a tenured professor. So if you want to go complain to your dean, you go ahead. I'm retiring at the end of this year and I couldn't give a flying any longer. You people are just vectors of disease to me, and I don't want to be anywhere near you. So keep your distance. If you want to talk to me, come to my Zoom. Our situation here.
I love
first
old
is-
people. Old people, they give 0 Fs. They really do. Like, it's just so, that's funny to
Imagine
me.
this is the guy teaching your kids, though.
Yeah. No,
if you
that's
go
not
to
funny.
Michigan, tenured Michigan University,
Yeah, well, that's why
Michigan's like what, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year?
That's why my daughter's not going to college.
This is what you get out of it.
yeah.
You get
No.
this psycho.
What
I-
a psycho.
Freshman or sophomore year.
Vectors of disease.
I think it was freshman year. Freshman year of St. John's, we had to take a New York State specific history course. which is cool. You know, you're in this state, you might as well learn a little bit about it. So I took a history of Long Island. Why I took it, I have no idea. I went to that class 3 times. I went to the first day, the midterm, and the final. The reason why I did that was, and I still have dreams about this. I have dreams that I'm going to fail midterms and finals because I didn't go and pay attention. But the guy just basically assigned reading material. I read it, took tests. This guy was the most boring, monotone person I had ever met in my life. He was old, God help him, maybe like 75, between 75 and 80 during the time that he was teaching this class. And I sat there. This was a 2-hour class. And about halfway through it, I said, I can't do this. I don't want to drop it because I've dropped like 5 classes since the beginning of the semester. I said, okay, let me keep this class because it fulfills the requirements that I need. And I said to myself right there, I said, I can't do it. Imagine having this guy as a professor. You'd probably stay for the entertainment.
Yeah, it's pure entertainment.
But what are you going to learn?
Yeah.
I remember we also had, maybe a year or two later, we had an anthropology professor who was, she was either studying for her master's or she was a PhD candidate. But I remember there were a couple times where she says, okay, you know, don't worry about this week. Don't worry about next week. I have to take some tests. I have to do some research on my own. And I remember saying to her, so then why are we here? Like, I'm paying for this class. This is a class I have to pay for. Why are you not teaching us? Why are there not anything that you're giving us? He's like, you're all going to get a passing grade for this semester. Like, what?
Yeah, what am I doing here?
Yeah, really, like, the more I hear about college, the more I see about kids, especially the kids who exist on college campuses nowadays. I mean, there seems no reason for it at all. And I'm pretty much at the point where I'm discouraging anybody about going to college.
Yeah, it's not worth it. The only thing that's worth going
medical
to school,
lawyer.
medical school lawyer. That's it. I was just going to say those are the only 2 things you should go to school for. Or, I mean, I guess computer science, but
there is, I kind of want to show you 2 minutes of my favorite YouTube channel right now. It's a channel called Ask Cliff.
Okay, while you search that, I want to talk about a video that I want to pull up that I listened to on the way here on Matt Walsh's podcast. There's a clip of, I don't know who this person is in Australia, but they're giving a speech and encouraging Aboriginals in Australia to
Yes.
The
I have
translator.
Seen this. Yes.
The translator is just like saying the same exact thing and adding the word one at the end of everything. It's so offensive and racist and insulting, but it's hilarious. Like
I really didn't get the whole context of it the first time I watched
it. It's just
but
excellent comedy.
Okay. For all you guys out there, this is a channel called Ask Cliff, and Cliff is a pastor and a minister, but who has studied the Bible extensively. So what he does is for the past 25 years, I think he goes on to college campuses all around the country, mostly MIT, Harvard, UConn, a lot of in Texas. But what he does is he goes out into, what do they call like the main square on college campuses?
Oh,
the quad. I
the
guess.
quad.
Is it called the quad? Do they say that anymore?
I said the quad.
I'd say like the main thoroughfares of these colleges, and he'll stand and talk to people, and then at some point a large group will have formed, and he'll go one-on-one with people. But the patience this man has, and I think I sent you this video, but just watch who he's dealing with. This is one of these videos that I think has been uploaded recently and was taken recently, because they'll upload videos from 5 years ago. You can usually tell by the clothes and by the iPhones and stuff.
Right.
This was pretty recent, but just watch what he has to deal with on a college campus.
Like, I'm not homophobic. I have gay friends. I'm not racist. I have black friends. Like, I've heard that way too many times, and I'm like, quit, because growing up in a very evangelical, ultra-conservative environment that definitely teaches that all lust is wrong. You have to have sex before marriage. I'm like, every time I've heard,
I love him so much. I love Cliff.
Of somebody being like, oh, well, I'm going to save myself for marriage. 9 months later, bam, they end up getting they have a child. And it's kind of sad because
he sounds drunk.
Because they realize that it's not completely wrong. They need to be safe about it. And I feel like we need to.
This guy rants for a little bit.
Education.
He's still going.
Like,
this is
that's his hangover meal. He's still wasted from the night before.
Educate ourselves. Abstinence does.
And he doesn't say anything.
All right, let me ask you something. Are you going to allow a hypocritical Christian to turn you off to the true Jesus Christ, who did not have a hypocritical bone in his body? Are you going to give a hypocritical Christian that kind of power?
That's a great
to
question.
Turn you off to the true Christ, who did not demean anybody, Instead, in Matthew chapter 23, he uses the word hypocrite 6 times to describe religious teachers. So Christ hated hypocrisy because it's lying about yourself. And it sounds like you hate hypocrisy also. Bravo. So don't allow a Christian hypocrite to turn you off to the true Christ.
And obviously, we're not saying anything. This kid goes on a rant for forever. And there are telltale signs that this kid is suffering from something mentally.
Okay.
He has a problem. He starts walking back and forth. He starts being very agitated with his hands and stuff. No.
Okay.
I think, he clearly has some problems. But then later, which is so apparent, on college campuses today, watch this.
All right, fine. But then wait a second. The point is, read the Gospels. Find out for yourself about how Jesus lived.
You see him in the background?
What he taught, how he died, and how he rose from the dead. Check out Jesus Christ, not how he's been misrepresented by Christians. Okay, now why would Trey, an African American,
This is so important.
believe in Jesus in light of the way his forefathers and foremothers were treated? Did I hear you say brainwash?
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of the.
Whoa, time out.
It's because a lot.
No. This woman said brainwashed. Trey, are you brainwashed?
Of course he's not going to. Nobody who's brainwashed is going to say yes.
Yeah.
I'm being brainwashed.
No
That's
one
exactly
does.
what it is.
I see.
Like we need.
But do you know Trey?
I don't know.
No.
Well, then why would you ever say what you just said?
I mean-
that a man who you don't know is brainwashed. Why would you ever be so judgmental?
I mean the reason.
No. I'm asking her. Come on, man. You're the one who said it. Let's go. You said Trey is brainwashed. You don't know Trey?
This is about to be the state of discourse in 2022 on college campuses. Just wait for it.
But you've said he's brainwashed. I asked him, are you brainwashed? He said no. I've also talked with him today already. And obviously, from my conversation with him, he's got his own mind. He thinks for himself.
And you see him in the back,
Yeah,
the same
he's
dude.
not right.
He's not right. Okay.
Okay.
And he's not a Christian because of colonialism. So why would you say that Trey is brainwashed?
Because
What's
I
your
would say
agenda?
any Christian is brainwashed.
Any Christian's
They use
brainwashed.
scare tactics.
Okay.
Sir,
Good.
you use scare tactics. We're burned in hell forever. We'll be separated from everyone we love. It's scare tactics.
Hell, I'd
We're
rather
being
go-
brainwashed.
No,
I'd
wait a
rather go to
second.
hell, honestly. Sounds way more
That's not funny.
spinning.
I can't stand when people say that. It's not funny.
Bored as and me like, where's the
Cliff has the patience of not even a saint. I don't understand how.
Look at
I know. If you're watching this, you can see it. But if you're listening to this, the guy just this should be a meme. It really should be. But let me just play the rest of this for about another minute or so, just so you can hear
Okay.
the state of what discourse is
Have
on
a
college
party.
campuses.
All right, well, you
Where
and
the
I should
heck
make a deal.
of-
You and I make a deal. You just put your faith in Christ, and throughout heaven and eternity, you won't have to see me, okay? I'll stay at the other side of heaven, okay? So you don't have to mess with me, okay?
No promise.
So just put your faith in Christ and go to heaven, okay? But it's going to be a lot better than the alternative.
Wow.
But ma'am, I'm afraid that you have bought into a line of thinking that is really scary.
Oh, I agree
You
with you.
do not
Yeah.
know this guy, and yet you stand out here and say he's brainwashed. Wow. Where are you getting off? That's incredible. That is so judgmental. I think that you've bought into, and if I'm not mistaken, have there been any professors who have influenced that thinking?
No, God no.
Good.
He's talking to
Then
himself
why would
in the
you
back.
say that this man is brainwashed?
I believe I already answered the question.
I would say a
No,
lot.
you haven't. Answer the question.
I would
you
say-
ask me that question.
I didn't ask you. Please let her speak. You've had lots of time to speak. She gets to speak also, you know. Go ahead.
I said.
Look at his New
because
Balance
we
sneakers.
use scare tactics.
Scare tactics?
Yes, we've already.
Okay.
This is,
Has anybody scared you into believing in Jesus? Okay. Nobody's scared Trey, and I can promise you nobody's scared me into believing in Jesus. And I can promise you, every African American member of the church that I pastor up in Connecticut, none of them have been scared into believing in Jesus. And I can promise you, when I went to Haiti, my friends in Haiti were not scared into believing in Jesus.
Here it comes.
They experienced the love of Christ, the truth of Christ, and they put their faith in him. And I can promise you, ma'am, it is so elitist for you, as a white woman, to stand here and say a black man and all those Haitians who believe in Jesus Christ have been scared into believing in Jesus. That is so incredible, it's scary.
You turned a simple argument into a racist point.
Thank you so
yeah,
much, sir. This is my
exactly.
best friend right here.
Now, the white girl who said that the black guy who believes in Jesus was brainwashed, is now saying, but this is my best friend here, and she's black. Isn't that the same thing?
It's the same thing.
That people do when I say, I can't be racist. I mean, this is my best friend.
Yeah.
Oh, you can have a best friend who's black. It still doesn't mean you're not racist.
Yeah.
I think liberal white women are probably like public enemy number one when it comes to discourse, when it comes to the collapse of civilization or the forthcoming collapse of civilization. I think that they're going to be responsible for it.
They are the reason why not everyone deserves the right to vote.
Let's talk about that.
This is it. I bet you all of those kids standing there, if you gave them a basic civics test, they'd probably pass a literacy test. But if you gave them a basic civics test, they would fail.
I don't doubt it.
This is why the whole myth of we have a moral obligation to give everyone the right to vote. No, we don't. No, we don't. We actually should not give any dude or woman off the street the right to vote and to shift the way that policies are going to be going to be implemented.
What do you think is the criteria that someone would have to meet to prove eligibility to vote?
I think it should be a very basic civics and literacy test.
Okay, almost like the test one has to take when becoming a citizen.
Yeah, something like that. They need to show that they understand how the government works, the three basic branches of government. They need to show that they can read and write. They need to show just basic understanding of how the government works. And most people, not most maybe, but a lot of people would not be able to do that. I see, and every time I see videos of students on a college campus, or I see videos, there's this one guy, I forgot his name, but he goes around and he asks people basic questions like, how many states are there? How many continents are there?
Right.
Like, if you don't know how many continents, or if you know how many states there are, you should not be voting. It's really simple. And we've been brainwashed to believe, I'm using the term brainwash, we've been indoctrinated to believe that every single human being deserves the right to vote. No, there's no such thing as a universal right that was laid out by the founding fathers that every single person deserves the right to vote. No, absolutely not. When the country was first founded, yes, it was only white men who could vote, but you also had to own land to vote. You had to show that you were a functioning member of society in order to shape who was going to be in office and who was going to be.
So let's draw that out
policy.
to 2022.
2022. I don't think that you should own property or own land in order to vote, but I do think you need to just pass a basic civics test.
Yeah.
And it could just be a multiple choice questionnaire, something that just shows that you have half a brain.
And upon passing that test, you're issued a voter ID.
Yes.
A valid voter ID.
A valid voter ID. But this is what I see a lot of videos of young people, especially, they're just proving time and time again that not just anybody who walks in off the street should have the right to vote. Because this is why, and I want to say this is why we've gotten slammed with so many outrageously harmful progressive policies. Because people who don't understand the way that the government works and who run on this faux compassion, I always talk about how leftists and progressives, they have this faux compassion that they wrap everything up in a bow of this fake care that they have for people. And this is how we get dumb policies like increasing the federal minimum wage, which we'll talk about later because I know I wanted to talk about how the federal minimum wage is connected to eugenics. This is how we get, not that we have universal health care, but this is how we get to the point where we vote in people who want to have universal health care, which on the outside looks like a very compassionate, caring thing. Sure, we want everyone to have health care, but that certainly doesn't mean that the government should be involved. And so people who want these policies, they have no idea of how the economy actually works, what would actually happen if the government were to have state control over things like healthcare or housing. Because there are people who also believe that housing is a human right, and they want to vote in people who the government will give housing to. North Korea, people think that North Korea was just taken over by some crazy dictator. The very first thing that the dictator offered to North Koreans was housing, food, and education.
Yeah.
That is the start of a communist society. And people don't understand that. And if you don't understand history, then you don't understand that the government taking control of very basic things in your life is very often the beginning of a communist state.
Do you see that as a bit of, on the other hand, government overreach requiring a citizen to pass a sort of government literacy test in order to be eligible to vote as a negative?
You mean like, do I think that's government overreach?
Yeah.
No, I don't. No, I'm not a libertarian. I don't think that the government should stay back and never get involved. No, I don't think that. I think the government does exist for very particular reasons. And yes, I do think that they should be issuing a test.
That was just an objective question.
Yeah,
I wanted to hear your answer, because obviously if, there are certain requests or certain tests required to drive cars, own firearms, get a driver's license, any sort of business license and stuff like that. They're,
you have to take a test.
Hoops, but
you have to take a test to get a freaking driver's license, and you're telling me that some rando can walk off the street and vote for who's going to be president, or who's going to. I mean, also the thing is, most of the people, they don't even vote for local politics. All they vote for is the presidency.
Right. Yeah, I think that's an issue too. I've never understood, and no one's been able to really articulate this to me, or I haven't seen any video that's been able to do the same. But I've never understood why a voter ID seems racist. A lot of the time, they'll bring up access to things. But whenever I hear those reasons being laid out, it always seems like the bigotry of low expectations.
It is.
You're basically you're already putting people in groups based on skin color, ethnicity, and then saying that they're not able to do something based on skin color, ethnicity.
Yeah, exactly.
It's understandable that it seems like rural people who live in rural America, probably requiring a voter ID or requiring to go to certain urban areas in order to do things, that might seem that might be seen as a disadvantage.
But but here's the thing. I actually think it's a good thing. I think having a barrier to entry naturally weeds out people who should not be voting, because if you are very serious about your convictions and who you want to see in office, you will jump through the hoops. And that is somebody who very likely understands how the government works and understands the implications of certain policies and how the economy works. That person will jump through the necessary hoops to get a voter ID. So here's an example that I always use, is kind of related. So I practice the Ido Portal method. Ido Portal is an Israeli movement philosopher who has teachers all across the world. One of his very first longtime students, his name is Johnny Sapinoso. I studied with Johnny in San Francisco for 2 years in person, and Johnny became a very close friend of mine. Johnny is a world-renowned movement teacher who I lived with him for a couple of years, and my friend said that people would literally give their left nut to study with Johnny, let alone live with him, because he's just the best of the best. Johnny's San Francisco movement group, he has a landing page, he has an inactive Instagram, and he routinely ignores emails of people who want to study with him.
Okay.
You have to reach out a certain number of times, or you have to show interest over a long period of time for him to even respond to you, to let you in the group. You can't just be like, oh, hey, I want to purchase a 10 class pack and just come in.
Right.
Because he intentionally wants people who are students, who have a long-term commitment to the practice. So having this barrier to entry, where you can't it's not like a gym or just some group fitness thing where people can just buy a pass, they come in and then they leave and never come back again. When you have this specific barrier to entry, you naturally attract people who should be there and who deserve to be there.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of any counterpoint that someone would bring up, then saying, okay, I get that. But then are you also minimizing the amount of people who even are going to want to vote? And then at that point, when you have a smaller group of people, is one party going to have more control, or is one party going to have more representation? Because when you think of voter ID, people who are in favor of voter ID are overwhelmingly conservative. So I think that would make liberal or leftists a little bit worried, saying, okay, if voter ID would ever come into law, we'd probably be at a disadvantage, only because we know the people who would be willing to go through these hoops would be conservatives to secure voter ID.
I don't think it would be.
Are they automatically thinking poorly of their own constituents? But in a sense,
yes,
by saying
they are. Yeah,
that our own people won't even get voter ID.
That's how lowly they think of their own constituents. That you think that the people who support you will not jump through the hoops or don't know how to jump through the hoops. It's not even that big of a hoop. You just have to go somewhere and show a form of ID and get some paperwork.
And then, according to you, take a test.
Yeah, and then take a test, which,
which is tough, and I get what you're saying. I mean, there was this I don't know if it was a survey that was done or this little experiment that was done where it was either exiting Harvard students in bachelor's program or entering Harvard students. They gave them an 8th grade exit exam from either the late 1700s or the mid 1800s, and none of them could pass it.
See?
Just to show, I guess, the state of education
Yeah.
now versus, 200 years ago.
Yeah, and I mean, I bet there are even a lot of college graduates, probably even some Ivy League graduates who would not be able to pass a basic civics test.
Yeah, I mean, who do you want to be able to vote? Do you want an 18-year-old who's never experienced the world and has lived in a sort of metaverse, TikTok sort of world where they don't get out and experience the world? Or do you want someone who has maybe traveled or has done maybe a sort of mission or something like that and who's active on his or her college campus? I mean, who do you give the voter ID to? I don't know. I think it's I definitely support it in a way. I just don't see it ever coming to fruition, just because I think that there are people who are involved in politics that know that they will lose any sort of power that they already have by doing that.
Yeah. I mean, maybe back to your question, maybe it would result in a lot fewer liberals going to the polls, because I do think that a lot of people on the left who support leftist policies, a lot of them are virtue signalers. And what's the nature of virtue signalers? They virtue signal, and they don't actually do anything in their life that would show what their virtues are, what their so-called virtues are, right? So maybe it would actually deter a lot of progressives from actually getting to the polls, because they just say that they care about all these things, but they're not willing to jump through the hoops and actually go through the actions that would allow them to vote for or prove that they care about these things.
Voter ID and minimizing mail-in ballots. I think that's what would...
Mail-in ballots should not even be a thing. I can't even believe people are arguing that we should have mail-in ballots. It's just like it's a voting day.
I just don't trust it on the face of it, being the experiences that I've had with any sort of delivery service, especially mail. Like, I just don't trust it.
Speaking of voter rights, so one of the things that the left is freaking out over is this new rule that you're not allowed to bring food to people who are waiting in line to vote. Have you heard about this one?
Yes.
So this is another one of those things that the media does such a good job at. They report part of the truth, and then they take that and they make it sensational to make conservatives out to be some sort of racist monsters. So yeah, it's true, but has anybody asked why this rule has been put into place? Why is it that when you're waiting in line to vote, you're not allowed to have anyone bring food to you? And the answer to this has not been talked about on any media channel by any news reporters. So the reason that they don't want people to bring you food while you're waiting in line is because so many people have had the issue where people will bring food and then convince you to vote for somebody.
Okay.
Yes, because you got to wait in line for... Matt Walsh actually did a really, really funny and accurate segment on his show the other day. He's like, are we such fat asses that you can't wait for 90 minutes in line without a snack? He's like, how?
Well, who's bringing food? Wouldn't you trust a friend or a relative to bring you food? Like, who's bringing food that's going to try to convince?
People who are trying to, what is the word? Who are campaigning? Not
canvassing?
Canvassing.
Yeah.
People who are canvassing for certain candidates will bring food, hand it out to people in line, and then use that opportunity to canvass for a candidate.
Right.
And that you should not have, nobody should be doing that when you're in line to vote.
Right,
when you're in line to vote, nobody should be canvassing and campaigning for a particular candidate.
Isn't that a rule that there's no campaigning within a certain footage?
And that's why they had this rule within 150 feet of the building a polling center. You're not allowed to have people bring you food, because that's when people will come in and campaign and canvass and convince you to vote for somebody. So that's the reason behind the rule, which makes sense. Nobody ever said that you can't bring your own food or that you can't eat.
They turned it into a race thing, though?
They turned it in, well, I don't know if they turned it into a race thing, but they turned it into a conservatives want to turn away people from voting, and this is why they put this rule in place.
Joel can bring me food if I need food while I'm on a polling location.
As long as you're
Joel, can you bring me food?
You don't wait in lines, so...
Oh, that's true, too.
I have no choice.
I did wait in line when I voted for 2020. I waited in line at the local YMCA where the polling place was, but I only waited for 10 minutes. Was that,
that's not too bad.
The peak height of COVID?
Yeah, so this is one of those things where the media does a great job of telling part of the truth and omitting the rest of it, just so that you think that conservatives are monsters who don't want people to vote. But it makes perfect sense. Nobody should be canvassing when you're within 150 feet of the building.
I agree.
Yeah, and
I agree with you.
But yeah, Matt Walsh's bit is so funny. If you guys don't listen to him, that episode was really great, because he gets into why you shouldn't just let any person off the street go in to vote. And on top of that, are we really making it an issue that you can't have someone bring you food? Like, you can wait.
Yeah.
You can wait.
Yeah.
Or you can bring food.
How do you feel about And we got to wind this down. We might not even have enough time to talk about eugenics and
We
minimum
can do
wage
that
until
for the
next
next
week.
one. Yeah, it's fine.
One last question before we go. And I also forgot to say like and subscribe and comment and ring the bell and all that other stuff. I don't want to go back and like put it at the beginning. I'll put it at the beginning anyway. But yeah, smash the like button. How do you feel about there only being one day, voting day, to be able to vote?
I think it should be one day. It's a voting day. It's not a voting period, because the life of politics, so much can happen in 7 days. So much can happen in 3 days in
What
the
about
life
2
of
days?
politics. Yeah, so much. 2 days. I mean, I think it should be just one day. It
Okay.
should be voting day. And
Yeah,
someone
businesses allow their employees to
businesses
leave.
allow their employees to leave. There have been some people who think that it should be a federal holiday so that nobody has to go to work so that you can go and vote. I'm willing to entertain that idea and have that conversation, but it should be voting day. No more mail-in ballots, no more early voting, voting day, and that's it.
It doesn't seem like a far out idea. You have a voting ID, shows where you live, come in, the pollsters, they verify that, and you go vote. How is that so hard? How have we
I
come
don't
to a
know.
place where it's been so screwed up?
I don't know.
Oh man.
Yeah, I know. It's
Oh,
really
boy.
wild. Oh boy.
Oh God. Okay, guys. Until next time.
We'll talk about eugenics next time.
Yeah, sorry about that. Keep
Because-
those questions coming in.
As a preview of the next time, almost all of the best/worst progressive policies came from eugenics. So we'll talk about
I
it
now
more next
have
time.
my photos of William F. Buckley on the desk, and Gina needs to bring in more.
I have my water bottle.
Okay. Until next time, we're going to talk about Andy Roddick and put that up as a Andy Roddick. Sorry.
Oh my gosh!
Who are we
Don't
talking about?
ever confuse Andy
Djokovic?
Roddick
Okay,
with the great.
We're going to talk about Djokovic and then put that up in a separate clip. So we will see you whenever the next time we see you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.